Hello and welcome to another edition of Digital Dialogues from Maritime Gateway. Today our guest is Mr. Jasjit Singh Sethi, Chief Executive Officer of TCI Supply Chain Solutions. Jasjit carries more than 30 years of work experience in sales, logistics and supply chain management functions, along with strategic leadership and change management. He joined TCI in the year 2000 and is now serving as CEO TCI Supply Chain Solutions. TCI Supply Chain Solutions is a single window enabler of logistics and supply chain, encompassing all the needs right from conceptualization to implementation for high value industry segments like automobiles, retail and consumer products, e-commerce, telecom and high tech, chemical, life sciences, and healthcare. He is currently serving as a director in various TCI group of companies and also a member of National Committee on Infrastructure, FICCI, member ASSOCHAM, National Council and Logistics, member CII National Committee on Retail and Advisory Board member of Maritime Gateway. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation and joining us.
Thank you, Mr. Ramprasad. It's a pleasure to be back, and thank you for this interaction today. Looking forward to some interesting conversations between us.
So when you say interesting conversation, I have a lot of questions for you, but let me begin with the most recent buzz in the industry, which has picked up a lot of pace after post-COVID. So our industry has been talking about digitalization, especially shipping and logistics sector. So today we have a lot of these technologies coming into operation. There is a big data being used and artificial intelligence, machine learning. So can you give me an idea of how much of technology and digitalization being used in our industry, either for improving our operational efficiency or predictive analytics or serving the customer better?
That's a very relevant question. And I think there are two dimensions to it. I think the first dimension is what the corporates themselves are doing. They are cognizant of the fact that every cargo which moves from point A has to be tracked all the way till point B and then also get the relevant PODs in order. So over many years, people were struggling with that very basic. But I would say last about 8-10 years now, that problem has been solved of track and trace, which is how the cargo is moving and the electronic POD. That is one base which has been done. Now, moving a little bit towards the other side, and then I'll come back again. India is one of the very few countries where digitalization has been led by the government. There are not very many countries where you have something called the e-way bill. Now, e-way bill came as a consequence of a GST, which was based on consumption. And since that has always been the case, so there are states who had the Bharti system. UP had a Bharti, Karnataka started something like that. So there was a need to prove that the goods have crossed my state and not being sold there as a vision of tax. When GST came in, pan-India, the first threat was how do we have these kind of a Bharti system, which was a menace earlier, and you would have long queues at all these state borders. You would recall them from earlier times. This was solved digitally by the government by saying that everything which is going out has to be put onto a portal, and based on that portal, you then track it, and any inspector on the way can just look at that truck and say, okay, this one is carrying this goods for this place. So that system, I think in India is exemplary, has not happened anywhere else. If you look at the European Union, despite being so advanced, has not done that. They are still very much relying on internal compliances, but the system doesn't exist. So one part of that is by the government. Second is the payment interfaces. They are probably the best anywhere in the world, very low cost, not like the credit companies, but payment interfaces are there, the UPI system. You also have a lot of others which are supporting this system. And these supports are, for example, that today a bill of lading has become very electronic. In terms of an invoice, nothing physical needs to be carried. Whatever we are doing, we can upload on a certain portal. So the flow of advices from the banks doesn't come in anymore. It is through their own portal. So the paper has reduced. If you look at the chain from an order from a customer to its fulfillment, maybe warehousing, delivery, then to the final payment, this chain is now almost all digitalized. And this has happened because of something very simple called an APIs. I remember way back when we began digitalization 2007, we had to go something called EDI, electronic data interchange, as a substitute for emails. So that you required some kind of a platform and it was a push data. APIs now for everything and linking together makes all the software almost like bolt-on. So you heard stuff like that we're going to do blockchain, this and that. Nothing was actually needed because APIs in a way made everything like a blockchain. That you had your own, not really like a blockchain, but that you had your own internal systems and you had a bolt-on space. So individual ERPs, government portals, all linked through that APIs. So the journey has been very good for India. And with now ONDC coming in, and then you've got OKIN, which is a new kid on the block. So you will see much more of democratization of data and information.
At one level, we have digitalized the entire mechanism. But how about using the more advanced tools like AI and ML kind of a thing?
I think in terms of analytics, if you look at the typical curve, what would be there was actually what happened. Then it would be why it happened, because that would prevent you from doing it as further. What can happen? For example, a simple example of that is when you're traveling using a Google map, it shows you where the traffic is. So what's your ETA? So what can happen? Similar are used by us in our trucking as well, looking at things like which are the historical areas of congestion, where do we have issues of no entry. So we do that predictive. And the fourth, the topmost is called prescriptive, making things happen in that way. I think what AI and ML in terms of synergy would do is something which is going to go beyond the present algorithms. We are still right now evolving on that stage in terms of using a little bit of intelligence in our systems. Chat GPT is, I think, used more by the public and by the common man than the corporate still now. They're still grappling with it, how to make it AI as a centerpiece of this. But going forward, you find that many of the tasks which were done earlier are done by bots and not the chatbots. Chatbots can be horrendous. Like I'm not a fan of them at all. But the bots internally, which says, okay, if I get an email, I will read that email, put that data into some structure and generate something out of that, which is useful. So those part of stuff are being done. So the bots, the algorithms, a little bit of predictive is being done already. And these are, not very old technologies. They're very new. So it will take some time for companies to go further, but in analytics, it is already being used. Maybe next 2-3 years, we will see more of it in the commonplace.
You talked about democratization of data. So there were always these concerns about ownership of data and the security of data. So how far these concerns are being addressed?
A is who knows what, and also does the government know too much also? Because that also leads to an issue at some point of time. For example, it could lead to issue with health data, which is there with the government. And which is, for example, we have employees and we have the health data. If it's there on a government website, the person wants to apply somewhere else or do something, he's prohibited by that. So there can be many of these pitfalls. So I think the data law in terms of what needs to be kept and for how long has to be very rigidly performed. And probably some of the data is not required to know. So I think we have not yet gone there. But if you are an Apple user, if you're signing up for many of these sites now, there's the option called Mask My Email. And they will generate an email ID, which is not yours, and it will link back to you. So you're saved from spam. So these are small, interventions which are happening now. If you apply for a Schengen visa, if you're a EU citizen, you have the right not to say where you're staying, because that's your right to privacy. So some of these laws, I believe, would also come in here, but which we are seeing the West to be a bigger harbinger. We have been more of a socialist country, so the right of our information to the government has been very high. I hope that kind of reduces to some extent. So Google knows a lot, Apple knows a lot, and the government also knows a lot.
So maybe it looks like that out of the three, the government knowing a lot is a risk for us.
It could be misused. It could be targeted. It could be misused, and we've
Right.
seen that in other geographies of the world. Yeah.
Okay, moving on to the another long-standing, ever-appealing question is the cost of logistics in this country. So, of course, both government and industry talks about it. There are a lot of either conflicting or whatever agreements on the cost of the logistics, how they arrived it, and what is the actual cost. Let us not get into that debate part of it. But recently, we have seen we have moved on the our efficiency part of it, few notches above the where we were. So, what is your perspective on today on the cost of logistics? What government has been doing? Is there enough being done to reduce the logistics cost, both from the industry or from the government? Where are we?
So I'll answer it in two parts. I think first of all, on the cost of logistics, actually there is a debate and there is no debate both ways. If you look at the data, I was at a conference 2 days before of one of the big fours, and they were showing the data similar to the government, which said that the road network is $150 billion and it is 65% of the overall spend. Railway was 29%. All told, $200 billion. Now, $200 billion is the figure which the government also has as part of its economic survey. Now, I think it's just a simple math to be done. 200 divided by the GDP. The GDP is probably 3.8 trillion. So you get the answer there. But there are some figures which are bandied about which don't have a basis. If, a percentage is based on a numerator and denominator. The numerator everybody is saying is a figure of 200 billion. The denominator is the GDP. Figure is already a foregone conclusion. Somehow people use that figure very loosely for some reason that it's going to be like a double digit. I've always maintained that, GDP of a country is a composite of the services, manufacturing, and agriculture, three major heads. So in our country, as in the US, these services are very high. US is about 80% services, mainly financials and software. India is also 60% services. So our GDP is not used, logistics is not used by the services besides public transportation. It's mainly for the goods and which is manufacturing, trading, as well as for agriculture. Only 40% of the GDP per se is using logistics services in terms of freight. So a figure of dividing by GDP itself probably is wrong because the composition is different. So, but if you want to divide that, it is 200 divided by 3.7 trillion. Your math probably would be better than mine, Mr. Ramprasad.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
Yeah. So it's about 8%, 8%. That's 7.8%. Now, is the government doing enough or not? I think where will it make a big difference? The intermodal, it will make a big difference there. Now, intermodal already has started a lot during the COVID. And people like us have about 50 odd yards and terminals, which are multimodal. So today, about 20% of our revenue comes from multimodal. So multimodal is in a way combining the best of all the modes. Long distance by a greener transport, which is railways using electric. Short distance by truck, which has got flexibility. So that is a very good marriage. And if you're able to meet the cost and time. That is happening. But what are the bottlenecks? The bottlenecks is the speed of the MMLPs. The DFC had to come in 2006-7 was the first time it was mooted. It's very, very late. And the MMLPs need to come in, the multimodal logistics parks in the right locations, which are common user and not a single user, so that they're able to get more cargo flowing in, flowing out. That is one. Second, if you look at the trucking industry per se, it is probably too heavily taxed. You have about a 30% of GST on the purchase of a truck. And then you have humongous amount of VAT on the fuel. Now, if the fuel VAT, fuel is not equivalent to alcohol and cigarettes. the same bracket as the state's revenue of VAT. If this is taken out of the VAT and put into GST, and the duty drawback is given, the cost would reduce tremendously. But today, our trucker is paying probably more taxes than anybody else. His main asset, 30% tax. His main component of operations, which is fuel, is about 65%. On that, he is paying 50% taxes. So if we are going to load him with so much of tax on capex and opex, how will the cost come down? In fact, if you look at the equation, probably we need to leave more on the table where the drivers are concerned, give them more in terms of better exits. Exits are like, these big truck parking lots with amenities of fuel and others. So they can park safely and have, a good sleep in a proper bed. So these highway amenities have not yet come in. We are making good and big highways, but we are not making them as fast enough for these. These are also social issues as well. And many times you may find a truck or a car on the highway which is, accident or damaged, and takes hours for that to get cleared. So these holdups will cause also a cost of logistics because you're going to be unreliable in logistics as well. So the short answer would be, I think less tax on fuel and more of these tri-modal or multimodal parks. Those are important. On the shipping side, I think we look at it from a more broader perspective. Recently, there's a law which is coming in that India will want the ships to be certain compliant in terms of fuel and age. Now, fuel is fine, engines can be changed, but age, nowhere in the world you have that age recession for a ship. It has to be seaworthy. But in India, we are trying to push a rule that above 25 years for this category, above 30 for that category. The ships are the only, modes of transport which go through a complete dry dock after a certain period, and everything is redone which is required. So probably that segment needs to not be even encumbered with this cost right now, but that is coming in for them, and that will hamper the coastal shipping. Then coastal shipping being given prominence is important in a port. A port guy will not want a small ship of 300 TEUs when he can get a 5,000-ton vessel, which he can get more money out of. But we have to promote the 300 TEUs because it takes traffic off the road and the rails.
You are still active in coastal shipping?
Very much. And these couple of new rules out there are going to push it back.
Because I was talking to some industry experts, they say that still the growth is very disappointing. The coastal cargo hasn't grown as much expected. A lot of challenges. So what has been the experience, and what do you want to change?
So I think in terms of the growth, it has been quite good in the right sectors. For example, what do you move by sea? Something which is very heavy and something which is near a coast. So if you see the movement today from Gujarat for things like tiles and steel, it is very high to the western coast. A lot of shipping lines are operating from, the Kandla area, Kandla, Mundra, Pipavav area, Gandham area, into Cochin, to Tuticorin. So that movement was not there earlier. And that's a good amount of movement for very heavy cargo. I don't think much of tiles are moving now from north to south by road or rail. They're mostly by sea. So there has been a good shift into sea, and that's also picked up in terms of its momentum. But to ensure that people want to get into shipping for coastal, it would be important that we take care of this. On the other hand, if you look at waterways, I don't think it's going to ever work in India. It is just activity effort down the drain for two very simple reasons. First, the rivers are not straight. They are meandering rivers. Banaras, Varanasi to Haldia is 1.5 times more longer by river than by road. Second, the rivers are silting. That has to be also done. So they don't have enough draft. The draft at some points is 2.5 meters. That's 8 feet. In the erstwhile swimming pools where you had diving was allowed. So you cannot run a ship in that. But even if you could, because the waterways are not straight, they are meandering rivers. It's not like you have the Rhine or you have the Mississippi. You don't have that. So we probably are putting too much energy into the waterways. That could do very well for tourism.
Yeah. Okay. Going back to your earlier response, you mentioned about where these multimodal logistics will work better, and then MMLPs. Though government has announced and very keen to see the launch of many MMLPs, I haven't seen much coming up except two or three. What is the scenario like? Is there lack of interest, or there are any challenges, or there is no appetite for investment into that segment? So, what do you see?
So there was effort by the government to put them under an umbrella called the Gati Shakti, which is an umbrella to ensure that all agencies work together towards a common goal. And there are some rules also which have been set forth for that. So to the credit of the government, it is still early days. And the other side is that the other agencies, be it the railways, be CWC, and be it the private players, and plus NHAI, which is doing the MMLPs also, they are still not under a common framework. So you have these all in pockets where it should be needed. So that agency, that umbrella has still not come. So as you know, getting work done between different ministries is not an easy task. And that is what we are facing. The first MMLP, which has been bid for and won by a concessionary in Chennai, will take still 3 to 4 years because the railway network is not there. The next one has gone in Indore, then there's Bangalore. So these will take time till the railway network comes in. So at the planning stage, this is important. Gati Shakti is a good thought, but the thought needs to have some teeth to it in terms of saying this is going to be the way we are going to go forward. So there are still too many people doing logistics in the country, and hence they are not aligned together. So, who owns logistics? So have you asked the question? Are we owned by Ministry of Shipping, Transport, Civil Aviation, Ministry of Commerce? The answer is probably still not there.
Okay. So you have operations even in our neighboring countries, South Asian nations, Nepal, Bangladesh. So how is the trade growth if you look at intra-Asia trade growth what is your perspective on these two countries you are dealing with?
So, we began Nepal a donkey years ago, back in the 70s, and that was the main trading partner for India, and there was no requirement for, any special license to operate in Nepal for delivery. Then we began Bangladesh, and our thought process has been to follow our customer because most of Indian businesses have some projects going on in both these countries, and also, of course, Bhutan and Sri Lanka. So Sri Lanka, we were about to open when the crisis hit them, and we kind of paused on those plans. But we are very active in Bangladesh and Nepal. Bangladesh has been plagued by a major issue of congestion at port. I think to some level we could solve that. A lot of cargo is moving by trains, thereby decongesting the road part of it. There's also been a new ICD made there, so that's also helped. So from erstwhile 4 weeks of congestion at those locations, it's now down to less than a week. Sometimes 3-4 days, sometimes 2 days also. So that's vastly improved because some amount has gone by rail. Railway, to ensure it doesn't get congested, has a quota system. They only allow certain amount of trains for certain sectors. So everybody gets kind of a democratic opportunity to send something by rail, which enables that suppose one train goes, it'll probably help about 30 trucks less, for example. So it enables a lot of, space at the road terminals. That's improved. Bangladesh, in terms of working and operations, has been very smooth. Nepal is not so. Nepal, in terms of financials as well, has not been doing well. So the economy of Nepal is quite affected. While on the other hand, Bangladesh is very robust. So our experience with Bangladesh has been very, very good. And we also are doing some intra-country logistics also in Bangladesh, which has been working well. And as part of that, we are now expanding to the to UAE. Again, the trade links of India. So that's currently on the anvil, and which was announced in the last board meeting. And Sri Lanka is still on hold. Let's see which way Sri Lanka goes. Though it has been a good trading partner for India for a long time.
So when you look at the company's strategy for future across these operations, what is the vision you have for the next few years in terms of expansion or investments? What are you looking at?
So TCI has been an end-to-end player across these services. So we began as trucking, put it into express cargo, which is moving the goods faster and on time, to logistics and supply chain, which is knowing what is in that cargo, how it affects the client, and that enabled for us to do production logistics or distribution and warehousing. And along with that, we felt the need that we did look at a multimodal platform. So we tied up with the shipping on the East Coast to West Coast as well. So we have on both the coast, and with TCI as a joint venture with Concord, which is for multimodal logistics. It's about 14 years now. It has been successful for both the companies, and we are able to, do real logistics and help customers achieve something which they could not do by a single mode. So that's across services. We also realized that we need to look at the verticals in terms of overall servicing them from end to end. So for us, what began as automotive then, digressed into mobility, which is personal mobility, and then to commercial vehicles, then to project cargo, which is, the big machines, which are moving machines, which help build the nation, the ones which are making roads and on the mines, the construction equipment. Then also into farm sector, into the tractor segment, tractors, tillers, and the ancillaries. So that segment grew. On the side of the consumer, retail was a big focus, which has become omni-channel now. So we had a lot of work for e-commerce companies as well as the retail and fashion. Along with this was the traditional part of the FMCG, which has also become more modernized, and that's also like globally it's called consumer products. Another part of consumer products is electronics. So that has also been a very major part, what is called high tech, the white goods, so to say. That's also been a big growth engine. With this, we felt that there's a need now to look at the population of India from the needs of the food security and from the healthcare. So we were incubating a cold chain network within the company. We made a separate company in 2018, and it's been doing very well and poised to serve these segments of both the food and the healthcare part. We also found that as part of our overall portfolio, chemicals is a very interesting segment. And that's a segment which we've been incubating. It's rather large right now in size, but it's not showcased yet. At the opportune time, we will showcase that separately as another vertical.
So in our industry, another focus area, rather buzzword, is sustainability, sustainable supply chain, sustainable logistics. A couple of weeks ago, I think I was reading that TCI has collaborated with Indian Institute of Management and establishing a sustainability lab. So as far as operations are concerned, where are you in these sustainable initiatives, and what actually this lab will deliver?
That's a great question. I think ESG is a goal for every company: environment, social, and governance. We add one more S to it, which is also safety. So if we look at the environment particular piece, so we have done some innovations which are a little bit different from the run-of-the-mill things. For example, we felt that there's a need to look at the big trailers also run on clean fuel. So we started to convert our used trailers, which are about 60 feet long, into CNG. And we've done about 30 of them, which are mainly plying in the NCR area. So because Delhi is one of the most polluted cities, as you very well know. It's not right now, but it has been on the radar, and it's been the most focused one. So these vehicles operate in those sectors. And of course, something below that is all CNG. The smaller vehicles are CNG. In electric, we have been toying with it for a long time now. We still have issues of payload and range. We are looking at the sweet spot in electric in terms of getting the right length, payload, and cost equation in place. We are a lot into personal mobility in electric, but not so much into commercial yet. That's an area we are working with 2, 3 companies right now to convert probably our existing vehicles into electric and keeping the payload intact. With that, there's been a fuel called LNG, which has not yet caught on in the country. There are a lot of pumps which are ready. They are awaiting a PSO license. And that is an area, again, where the government can help out in terms of expediting the PSO license for those pumps. Because LNG is probably a cleaner fuel, easier to carry LNG than CNG. CNG has got its own tank. LNG is liquefied, and this is in the gaseous form. So that part is important. What our lab does is actually trying to see what is going to be the carbon footprint of different modes of transport. It starts with that to see what is, as a shipper, if I want to send cargo from A to B, he can see that if I'm sending by multimodal or sending by a truck of this size, how much will be the carbon footprint. And the first part of the lab is awareness. People should know what they are responsible for. Once we know and we can measure it, then we can improve. So these are baby steps in that direction. It's a bit early in the day for India, but the response has been very good by shippers. People are looking at it in terms of understand the carbon footprint. We're trying to integrate this with more companies so they can take out their own metrics and then have a metric displayed that this was last year and now I'm here and now I'm here. Because the net zero objective means that would reduce the emissions overall by 93%. The current trend globally, what people have promised, is not going towards that. It's actually going towards a 13% increase by 2047. That is the deadline year. So a lot of work to be done in that.
But that is a very good initiative in the interest of the overall industry as well. I'm sure other industries also will pick up. Maybe other companies also will look for this kind of support mechanism where both awareness as well as application will come into action.
Yeah.
So, Jasjit ji, it was a really engaging conversation. Thank you very much for joining us and sharing a lot of insights into digital supply chains and the logistic costs and multimodal, intermodal operations. So, a lot of stuff we have discussed, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, Mr. Ramprasad. Thank you.
Thank you.